Anyway, so we have very little time, and I have so many questions I want to ask y'all. But I'm going to start with Matt. Matt, 8 years ago? 7 years ago. I'm not sure what you're going to ask. But you had to audition for one of the greatest quartets, legendary quartets in the entire world. And it was let's just say, it was a gig that many would like, and well deserved that you had it. But could you walk us through a little bit about the audition process, like what happens when one auditions for these guys?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a long story. I'll try to give you the abbreviated version.
We have all night.
They strung it out for 3 months, so they made me kind of have a lot of nightmares and really, work up a. But I finally got it, so all is well. Basically, in the late 80s, I went to USC and studied with Bill and a little with Scott there. And so I got to know them there and got some great training there, of course. And after I graduated, basically, I stayed in touch. We were all really good friends. And I also went into a heavy kind of jazz phase during the 90s. So they knew I was doing that and still doing classical guitar. So I guess long story short, when Andy announced he was going to leave and they were looking for a replacement, I was one of the people that they thought that could fill those shoes of being somebody that could improvise a little bit, do some non-classical stuff. And I don't know, I was one of 8 or 10, something like that they selected to audition over, like I said, this painful 3 months. And it was actually not constant auditioning. It was just 2 or 3 formal auditions, but they went to Europe and tried a few people out. So I was back in LA, biting my nails. Anyway, so in the end, like I say, after a few formal auditions, meetings, they decided, yeah.
Indeed, and we're glad they did.
I am too.
But I remember in the process that, John, I just want to ask a couple more things. I mean, John, you told me that one auditionee in the process had a particularly small sound. What kind of things were you guys? What if you can think of it, do you look for in getting a new member in such an established quartet?
I think everybody had a little bit of a. Is there a switch on this?
Yeah,
there I am. Each of us, Bill, myself, and Scott, probably had different things that were, interesting to us, and maybe we won't go into that. but I think a lot of it did come down to blending in both sound-wise, which is kind of a big. I mean, it's a big issue. Probably in guitar quartet, probably, and I don't know. I imagine it's. I mean, we're in an egocentric guitarist way. I feel it's more critical in a guitar quartet because there's such a huge variety of sounds in the way people play guitar. And since Matt had kind of come out of the same, school, so to speak, literally and figuratively as us, he was kind of the perfect fit in that way. And then again, he had the chops for doing non-classical stuff, which we do a lot of. Different people's point of view on repertory and that sort of thing. I think that, one of the things we asked people, we had questions for them. One of them was construct a program. What would you want to do for a record project? Who would you want to commission for new pieces? Things like that. So there were lots of different criteria, and each of us had sort of different ideas, but I think a lot of it came down to sound. And then the other thing too is that probably of everybody we audition, we just kind of felt Matt was the person who we felt really would work, personality-wise would work.
Which is
with
huge.
us too.
Yeah, you spent. Go ahead.
And it turned out he was really, really fast at learning stuff too, and he had to learn 3 programs basically right off the bat. And I think we're all amazed how quickly he picked this stuff up.
Yeah, and we knew Matt from before. We knew he was a super nice guy, and as soon as he joined the group, we found out he was a jerk. I mean, it was it was all a sham. Yeah.
What a shame, I know. Yeah. Well, he's not here, so you speak rather.
I mean, you're talking about a sort of a semi-dysfunctional family anyway. Because the 3 of us have been together for 32 years. Right. And
it's like the Oprah.
And only,
Valentine's Day's good.
Yeah, Valentine's Day. Yeah. And only 2 other people have sat in that chair, so it's,
Exactly, yeah.
and so it's almost like a family, and we spend a lot of time together on the road, and it's this sort of esprit de corps, camaraderie, and like interpersonal stuff. It's so important too. And of course, the playing, the musicality, the sound, chops, and everything is foremost. But it's really made things super, super easy.
It's huge. It's a huge factor. You've basically established such great repertoire for this ensemble over the years, over the 32 years, and you've done extraordinary arrangements and had great arrangements done for you. Can you say a few words about what you think, and I know this is very difficult, but what you think really works, what makes a good arrangement, or any tricks, maybe certain tricks that you found work that make 4 guitars speak well, given that the register is the same, and I mean, John has a 7-string, but basically it's not a string quartet. So they're when arranging for classical guitars, there's a lot of pitfalls. Go ahead.
Well, maybe I'll handle this one, because we've all done arrangements. I've done quite a few, and the sort of pithy thing you can say about arrangements is that it's really easy. You just have to pick the right piece and the right key, Right. But it's like picking the right piece is really tough, And there are certain pieces that just wouldn't work, Barber's Adagio for strings probably wouldn't work, Air on a G string, or something really slow and sustained. Even though
Bolero. We've had a lot of requests for Ravel's Bolero, actually, yeah.
But maybe a good example of like some of the tricks. I mean, we're doing these 2 Mexican pieces by Copland, which were originally orchestral pieces. Actually, the first one is kind of a slow, sustained piece, but somehow it just kind of works, I think. But the second one, which is called the Danza de Jalisco, it has a lot of coloristic things, but a lot of percussion. And in a way, this whole program tonight, because it's this Latin thing, we're going to be banging on our guitars a lot.
There shall be much
But
banging.
when I was arranging it, I was thinking, well, how do you imitate like a cymbal crash? And I don't know if I can do it while I'm holding the mic. Yeah. I'm not tuned up for it. So we have to do, It's not exactly a cymbal crash, but in the context of everybody.
I didn't know that was supposed to be a cymbal
It
crash.
was.
It sounds like a guitar.
It sounds like a guitar, I know. And there's this one place where he uses a ratchet. It's this little thing that it's like this thing and just
Percussion.
How can you get that ratchet sound? And I thought I can go, just sort of put my nail against the strings on the wrong side of the block. And you were doing all kinds of, tapping, and you'll see in the other pieces. I mean, these are all percussion tricks, but there are also lots of things where you try to use the resonance of the instrument as much as possible. And a lot of times in the group, you'll have single line in octaves, handling melodic stuff rather than in unison. Octaves work really, really well.
So single lines and octaves, yeah.
And that against full strumming chords, I think it's full and resonant, and it just kind of sounds like guitar music. Ultimately, a good arrangement should sound as if it could have been written for guitars.
Right.
That's the measure. If it's like, oh, that sounds really great on guitar.
And it sounds like obviously the Copland piece and many others have inspired you to use your imagination to come up with these great sounds, which is what makes the classical guitar better than any other instrument. I didn't say it, did I? And so in terms of, let's say pitfalls, many composers have written for you. What are some of the pitfalls that you think, can you think of an instance where you think this is, the range isn't right, or the range, they're too much in mid or not?
Scott, can you think of it? We don't have to name
You've all
any
been doing
names.
great, so I've been keeping quiet.
You don't have to name any names.
Well, things that haven't worked so well, right? Is that what you're saying?
If they're pitfalls, it's in other words, what you would advise a young composer who wants to write for you fellows, what, some do's and don'ts, and you think, there was this case where Ben Verdery wrote this piece for us, and it was like, like, whoa.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah,
Anyway.
don't mention him, please.
One thing that happens a good deal And I think composers really don't understand this yet, but I think with us, if we get a piece like this, we'll immediately change it. It's that it's very tempting to write, hierarchically. So you have first fiddle, second fiddle, etc. So a couple people get all the juicy lines, and one person gets the bass notes, the whole notes. And I guess you could argue you get paid more per note that way.
Yeah.
But we don't work like that. We really immediately start chopping it up. In fact, we played a lot this and recorded the Rodrigo concerto, the Concierto Andaluz, and that was written for the Romeros. And it's very typically, it's lots of fast notes over there and lots of slow sustained notes over here. Well, we just switched it all around, and it kind of confuses the conductors because they're looking over here for a cue, and it's the guy over there playing, So, but that's one of the first things we look for to make it interesting for us, but also I think for the listener, to really kind of get this feeling that it's more of a team, and it's more of a unit, and not just 1, 2, 3, 4,
I just thought of one other thing that I think is really important. It might not be that obvious, and we kind of discovered it by accident, but especially in longer pieces, if you don't have everybody playing all the time, like if you break things into duos, and we have a number, Bill particularly, I think the arrangement that you did that really broke that barrier in a big way was El Amor Brujo, which is the version we do is like 20 minutes long. It's just, for us, very long piece.
It's like a signature piece for you guys, I
yeah.
would say, right?
And it has all these little episodic duos, even little solo bits, and that's just really, really nice to break it up. If you just got wall-to-wall quartet all the time, I mean, there's nothing particularly wrong with it, but I think it just helps a lot when you break it up.
Right.
And plus, people see the personalities of the quartets. We heard a great quartet actually last summer in Germany. We heard the Tantalus Quartet, and they're doing a piece by this Minnesota-based woman composer whose name I'm forgetting now, but it had these really long solos, like cadenzas for each of them. It was really a beautiful piece. So I think that's one thing that I like, yeah.
Maybe the only other thing I would say, like if someone's writing for 4 guitars, is we kind of like knowing really what the composer wants. If you know what I mean, it's like, here's this note. Well, how long do you want it? Like any kind of color? I mean, is it, what's the attitude here? And I think the more that a composer can really put his stamp without being, Takamitsu-esque about it, like overdoing it, But sometimes you'll get a piece and it's just like, here's a sequence of notes, and then it's up to us to decode it and stuff. But I think, because color is, I think it'll be really clear by the end of the night that one of the things we really try to explore is the potential for color on the guitar, and it's, the Segovia thing, it's the orchestra,
right?
The
which
miniature orchestra, yeah, but I think composers would be well served to be real strong about what they want and make it real clear on the page, and it just makes it so easy to then understand what their ideas are.
Great, that's great. I mean, on that same sort of topic, what would you say to a young quartet as a really great 1, 2, or 3 pieces to play, to improve their playing as a quartet, to learn as musicians? What would you consider to be 1 or 2 pieces, or 3, or?
I think for us that I felt that when we first started playing, we were doing arrangements that Pepe had. We were all students of Pepe Romero, and we were being coached by him. And so he was giving us arrangements that the Romeros had been doing, a lot of, heavy on the Spanish music, a little bit of Bach. And then, little by little, we started getting some other things. But I think the piece that I remember that really made us like sit down and say, what are we, we're not just winging it here, we're not just a bunch of soloists, we have to really figure out what we're doing, was actually that little Mozart symphony. Because when you play that kind of music, I mean, people talk about the transparency and that sort of thing, but in real terms, what that means is you have to, because there's so little in the music in a way compared to something like some of these Spanish pieces, you have to everybody has to agree exactly how you're going to be playing, like accompaniment figures. It's what we call articulation, groupings, little stresses, shaping of like small units and that sort of thing. And that's one where we really, had.
And whose arrangement was that?
It was mine, actually.
That was yours.
Yeah.
Great,
Yeah,
great.
we haven't played that in years. It kind of doesn't work, but
So you would say, what about a Haydn quartet?
it would be the same
Same
thing.
thing,
Yeah,
right,
anything, I think, because that classical music is so transparent, and that music, you make it or break it on those choices that you make, and you got to be very, very precise about that. Whereas a lot of the things we were doing today was you could just kind of, everybody kind of go their own way in a way. What do you think? I mean, that's...
Well, I still remember, I remember John saying something years ago that I still remember being really, germane to this, which is for the first few years of our existence, we figured out how to play together. So we would play like Bach Brandenburg concertos and all this, fast motoric stuff to like play together and rhythmic and get groove. And then he said, then we spent like 20 years trying to figure out how to not play together. Which, in other words, like when we first tried to do like Jim Smith's arrangement of La Soirée dans Grenade by Debussy, this beautiful piano piece that's, it's a solo piano piece, and you try to be very free and rubato and with four people to be really free but together, that's a whole other thing, because it forces you to sort of have a collective sense of flexibility, and
With
that takes
with the arrangement, Jim Smith being the former head of the USC guitar department and an extremely great friend of all of us, but also an ingenious arranger, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, would that also, the arrangement, allow this kind of freedom, you would say, as well?
Yeah.
I mean,
And there-
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say there's like some examples of that kind of rep in our program. We're doing this Villalobos piece arranged by Sergio Assad, and it's also a piano piece, and that kind of calls upon that same kind of like, oh, can we be a little free here, but not too free,
And I mean, on that note, back to Matt, and well, all of you, but you are masters of ensemble. Is there any tips you can, when you first joined the band, as it were there anything that you immediately learned from them about being a better ensemble player, technique that you could pass to younger players? John once, well, I'll speak for John, but you speak first, because you told me once, just looking at somebody's hands, just looking at Scott's hands, or just, was it, am I putting words here, or is that, But Matt, can you think of things that,
Well, I've learned an immense amount from these guys since I joined. It has more to do with super refined phrasing, articulations, and things like that. As far as ensemble goes, I think you have to be really flexible, really listen. Listening is the key thing, and get experience with taking cues and giving cues and that sort of thing. I think I learned a lot when we first joined. We did the Brandenburg Concerto arrangement by Jim Smith, number 6.
number
I think it
6,
was.
right?
And that was really good. I learned a lot about, it had to be really together, but also we talked about different color in that than I had ever thought about with Bach. And I remember in the slow movement, they had me try this interesting pizzicato idea. I had the, what was that, the harpsichord part or something? Anyway, so, it's just, being open to ideas. There's a really great exchange of ideas in this group. So that's key for any group to do really well. But, can't get away from the fundamentals. Just really listen well and know the other parts. Be good about writing in cues if you have to. I mean,
Right.
pretty.
Are there any particular exercises that you guys did even as students to improve your technique? I remember one, but I don't want to...
Well, yeah, we used to just do silly, kind of obvious things, like we'd just play scales. So, we'd play a C major scale, and Bill would play C, I'd play C. I have my students do this when I have student quartets. So everybody plays the first note of the scale, and then they play D, and then they play E, and they play right up the scale, and so you get this bum, 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 bum.
And the idea is to...
To match tone. Well, to match tone, to match volume, the length of the note. I mean, every possible aspect of that.
It's a little off topic, but back to one of the other questions. It's a really good piece for student quartets is the arrangement, I think it was Bill's, of the Bach, or Andy York's, the first prelude in the WTC.
Oh, yeah, that's a great, I love that.
Where each guitar has one of those notes. That's a
But
fantastic,
each guitar plays one note. And
that's
so
a
you have
fantastic study.
you have to...
You played that here. I heard that
I
here.
think so, yeah.
And is that published?
I don't think so.
Oh.
Probably will be now. So.
Yes, it will be tonight, yeah. We'll call it. But you were going to say, Scott.
Oh, well, just along the lines of what we used to do, the scales and all that stuff. But one particularly great exercise, which I've done in workshops, Jim Smith, he used to have us, I don't know if it was us or people in the ensemble class, but we were in a particularly tiny room at that point. Now we have a much larger room for this thing, but we would sit in each corner of the room facing the corner, and then we'd play. You'd just say, okay, go. I'll count you off. And you have to play. You can't see each other. You can't take cues. You really have to listen. And I just thought that was Jedi. It was just so Jedi. And I love that. And it's a very, very useful tool not to have to rely on, watching somebody, beat their foot or nod or anything,
Right.
Yeah.
You have a nice watch there. What does it say? What does it say?
It says
Oh,
7:25.
I can't believe this. All right, because I have to get to other
Ben,
final. Yes.
We got to talk about like the important events of tonight. I mean, we got to talk about it.
Yes, we do. Go.
Well, I just have to say because we were supposed
You have
to
two
we were
premieres
supposed
tonight.
to play last night in Burlington, Vermont.
And what happened?
I don't know.
You just weren't into it,
something
right?
white
They
fell from
were
the
not
sky.
into it. They
But
said no.
luckily, we found out, on the way. Let's not go to Vermont because otherwise there's no way we'd be here. But the added benefit to that is that we didn't play two pieces last night. So tonight isn't just the New York premiere; it's the world premiere of two pieces.
I guess.
Yeah.
So they were so happy for
Thank
the
you.
snow.
Thank you, Nemo.
Yeah, right.
And one of them is by a dear friend of ours from San Antonio, Matt Dunn, who's a sort of like a classical jazz guy, and it's a really cool sort of Cuban salsa meets jazz kind of thing. It's called Cuba Libre, and really fun piece. But I would say the main work, the big work, is a brand new piece by Carlos Rafael Rivera,
Yes.
who's a dear friend of ours, and it was co-commissioned by the Y, Burlington, and a presenter in California, especially for this. And it's a really cool piece. It's called Yambe, and it's based on sort of real typical Afro-Cuban call and response. He calls it pregón and something else. I can't remember what it is. But as you'll see, I mean, it calls us, it asks us to be, like a Cuban salsa band 1 second, and then a contemporary music ensemble the next, and then a percussion ensemble the next. And it's pretty cool, and we're excited about it.
Great. No, we're all thrilled. Cannot wait. It just kills me that we're at the end. I have obviously wanted to ask so many more questions about rehearsing, but I have to get to a more important thing, which is you said 32 years they've been together, and they have been many, many places, and the road is a very cruel place. And I was even going to write this book about, that Scott titled, I still might, called Roadkill, about various things that happen to a guitarist on the road. So I just need two stories quickly that I'm thinking of, or at least one. John, you guys were playing somewhere, and there was some droppings, or?
Well, I mean, actually, I was going to do a different story.
Oh, okay, you go ahead.
I mean, all of our stories come from the very first tour we did. We were doing this tour in Mexico when we were students, and we did like 50 school concerts. But my favorite is the getting stuck on the top of the pyramid story. Is that okay? Because so we had to play in the afternoon in this little town in the Yucatan, and they said, "Oh, you're close to one of these incredible Mayan ruins." It was Uxmal. And we went to the top of this, we're on the top of this pyramid, and we noticed that the van driver was like, got in the van. And we were like, what? And we see this line of clouds coming, like, and it started raining like it hurt your head. And we were like climbing down this thing, and we got into the car, and we are completely drenched. And we're not anywhere near the hotel, so we have to go to where we're gonna play. And we actually, this is when Anissa was in the group, the first member of the group, but the three of us took our shirts off to try to dry them off in the van. So we pull into this town, and we're looking for dry clothes to buy, but it was siesta, and all the stores were closed. So he pulls up to these two little Mayan women, and they're looking up at us, and I said, I lean out the window, and in Spanish I say, ¿Dónde podemos comprar unas vestidos, unas camisas. And they looked at, and they thought that we were naked. Like, they were, and they just, but ultimately, like, my shirt dried off enough, but Scott got a garbage bag, and he punched out the sides, and he wore it like a poncho. And that's what he wore.
Perfect. What can I say?
Another good one. Actually, one of the very first things that happened on that tour was we pulled up and we came in. We had a meeting with the organizers of this big tour. It was like a cultural department thing, and so they get us set in our hotel.
In Mexico City.
Yeah, so it's in Mexico City. It's it's dinner time. So okay, let's go get something to eat. And so we meet down in the lobby, and Anise is down there already, and she's got her guitar with her. And we said, we're going to dinner. What are you doing with your guitar? And she was always kind of like paranoid about a lot of things. And she said, you're not leaving your, I have my wallet, I have my passport, don't leave anything in your room. And it's like, this is how we're starting our career, right? Like with all this traveling, we're going to carry everything with us every time we leave the room. And she said, no, you can't leave your guitar in your room. So, okay, fine, we'll leave them at the front desk. So we take all our guitars, we go up, bring our guitars down, leave them all at the front desk. We go out to have this nice dinner, we have a few drinks, we're feeling good, and we stagger back to the hotel hours later, and we're walking up the stairs, and the door's open, and we can hear it almost before we even walk in. You can hear the bellhops and everybody, they've got our guitars out, and they're all playing. They literally had all four of our guitars out, and we're like strumming away and doing Guantanamera. So that was, but I mean, for 2 months, basically, it was just one thing after another on that tour. It was just unbelievable.
Well, one particular thing that happened to me, and this is, this is like, you think, man, I've earned my dues now, We had a free afternoon. We had rare free time on this trip because we were doing like 2 or 3 concerts a day. We did 50-some concerts in like, 5 or 6 weeks or something. So we were near a beach somewhere down in near Cancun, and so we thought, okay, we had a little morning thing, and now let's go to the beach. Okay, we'll go to the beach, and we had a concert that night, but we had plenty of time. So we're all at the beach, right, and Mr. Gringo here, right, I put a little sunscreen on, and I go in, and the water is just so amazing, and I'm in there I think I fell asleep, I'm just kind of floating around, and the water is particularly transparent there. I mean, the sun it acts like a magnifying glass, so you get burned quicker. And I burn very easy. Anyway, I got out of the water, and I'm all red, and I thought, oh, great. So, but then, I started feeling nauseous right away. And we had a concert that night. We get to the venue, and now I'm just dizzy and nauseous and not feeling well. And they notice that, hey, man, what's wrong with your back? And I had these bubbles on my back. And it was like a 2nd-degree burn. And so we went to a local clinic. This was literally in the jungle, Went to a local clinic, and they said, well, there's nothing we can do. We played the concert, and I had to play with a shirt draped over I couldn't move. They had to hand me my guitar, and all I could do was just sit like this, and And so they said, you're going to have to, sit upright overnight with a mosquito net because you can't get bitten, you get infected, So we bought a mosquito net, and so while these guys are all sleeping, I'm sitting up like this all night, And in the morning, what do? We go to the clinic, and they proceed to, anyway, little alcohol, little lance, and went and played a concert that afternoon. So
He walked into one of the, he was all bandaged up and it was like Frankenstein. And these poor kids are like, oh my God.
Yeah. So I figured
You've paid your dues.
If I can play a concert in those situations, it's I feel like the Monty Python skit. Kids these days, they don't understand. Second-degree burn. That's the way to go. Yeah.
You had a mosquito net. Oh, in my day. We would have dreamed for a mosquito net.
Yeah. Here we are laughing at Scott. He got burned. It's fantastic.
Their nickname for it was Mr. Bubble.
Yeah. So the moral of that story was, don't go in the sun the day of a concert. Is that, would you? Yeah, okay. Anyway, thank you so much, guys. I so appreciate it. We cannot wait for the concert, obviously, but I guess we do. We have to have a half an hour. But thanks so much. Fantastic.